Hey guys, Freddy here. As you might be able to tell from my voice, I'm recovering from a bout of the flu. I've spent much of the last week bedridden, or at least couch-ridden, feeling sorry for myself with fevers, shivers, muscle pain, the whole flu experience. I really got it all. It was a fun time, I'm sure. But that's just given me time to think about things. But unfortunately, it means that what I'm about to say might just be a bit of a fevered rant. You see, while I've been lay there trying to get better, it's just given me plenty of time to watch YouTube. And while I've been researching things for work, I also researched stuff like the old school Renaissance. You see, it's something that has interested me, but the enjoyment of which has kind of skipped me past. You see, people desire older versions of Dungeons and Dragons, thinking that somehow progress, playtesting and refinement has led to a less pure system. Whereas I'm just a fan of the more modern systems. 3rd edition I think was absolutely spot on. I'm a big fan of 5th edition. And while there's loads to love in older versions, I do think their time has passed. And reasons for that include things like THAC0. THAC0 was horrible. In your 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, you're rolling a d20 and you're adding your bonuses. And you're comparing that against the armor class of the opponent, which is their armor rating plus any bonuses they get. It's simple. Roll a dice, add your bonuses, compare it against a target number. Really, really easy. Whereas THAC0, what you had to do was you were rolling a d20 and comparing it to a table based on your level and class. So, if you're a 10th level fighter, you need to roll an 11 or better to hit. Armor class 0. To hit armor class 0, THAC0. An unarmored target, though, changes your dice roll by adding to that, so you're going to roll higher. But as armor ratings go up, they go down. So an unarmored target starts at 10, but as they put on armor, they get closer to 0. As they gain magical items and dex bonuses, they will go as far as -10, taking away from your dice roll, and meaning that you won't be able to hit your THAC0. Of course, you get any bonuses onto your dice roll, they get bonuses, things like that. But it's terrible. It's comparing it to a table. I hated it then and I hate it now. It's a pain. And the idea that this is somehow better is just ridiculous to me. I definitely prefer simpler, faster rules which just get out of the way and let me get on with my game. I didn't come here for math. I came here for fun. And that's what I thought it all came down to. Some people liked older rules, whereas I thought that was a bit stupid. But sick and finding myself with plenty of time, I began watching various old school Renaissance videos. I found the real reason that people seem to like that type of game seems to be for equally stupid reasons. So after watching these videos, my revelation is, the old school Renaissance games give you less options, so therefore that gives you more options. Seems to be the opinion of multiple YouTubers out there who adore these games. You see, the main problem people have with 5th edition, it appears, is there are so many skills, class features, feats, etc., that your character becomes limited by them, and everything becomes just about dice rolls rather than your imagination. So if you're facing a fierce enemy, a giant for example, with 5th edition you've got attacks with bonuses, meaning that you just roll a dice, and if you hit, you roll for damage. But say the proponents of the old school Renaissance, without all of these bonuses hampering you, you might tell the Games Master something like, I leap onto the shoulder of the giant, balancing there dexterously while slicing down his throat. Which I agree is far more dynamic and dramatic. It does sound great. But what's stopping you do that in 5th edition? One of the most fun encounters I've had is in 5th edition. We were in a cave and we were crossing a rope bridge, facing off against enemies on the far side, when from the cave floor far below we came under fire from a bunch of archers firing arrows up at us. When my turn came around, the narrowness of the bridge meant I couldn't get round the other players. I could have pulled a bow and fired back, but I'm a melee specialist, so I really wouldn't have been good at that. So I looked at the battle map. I started to question the Games Master. See these rocks here? Are they sort of surfaces or are they steep? Well, they're kind of angled. And I came up with a plan, and I bounced from rock to rock across, parkouring my way down, and then finally coming down with a massive sweep and hacking down on the tops of the archers. Of course, the games master agreed with this. He made me make athletics rolls to make the jumps, but I was down amongst the archers causing chaos. It felt epic. And there's no reason why that doesn't work for any version of D&D. A bit of imagination beyond the roll to hit and the roll for damage. But that's just another point that proponents of the old school Renaissance bring up. With that athletics roll, if I'd failed, all my dramatic description would have been for nothing. It all came down to just a dice roll. But I don't take that as a worthwhile point. The roll added risk and challenge. If I'd have failed, I'd have come tumbling down, probably disarmed, lying at the feet of this group of opponents. If there's no risk, if there's no challenge, then it's just a matter of who makes the best description. Fighting the Tarrasque, the most fearsome beast in Dungeons & Dragons, just comes down to describing how you leap up to its shoulder, find a vulnerable spot in the back of its neck, stab your dagger in, severing its spinal column, and defeating it. It's disabled, it can't do anything. You've won by description if there's no dice rolls involved. The dice roll also adds chaos. The player can end up victorious, or flat on their back with a monster towering over them. And depending on what he's doing, it should be easier or more difficult. This is, after all, a game. There should be an element of risk, of chance to it. I will, however, concede one point to people bringing these points up, that perhaps the options and variety of choices that 5th edition gives you does hamper your imagination. I've spoken before of the game I ran at my local community centre for a bunch of teenagers. Well, in one of the first sessions, the sorcerer in the party forgot to select his spells. Since it was a first session, I was willing to put things on hold while he went and selected them. But, amazingly enough, he didn't want to hold things up. He didn't want to interfere with everybody else's fun. So he just rolled with the situation. The party was on a ship, which was boarded by pirates, and he yelled at the ones confronting him that he was their inside man, and they should leave him alone. As a sorcerer with a high charisma, he succeeded in the easy rolls I gave him, as I thought the imagination lowered the target numbers. I thought this was a risky, fun plan, and an interesting way to take the story. And then he ran interference and provided distractions while the party fought on. But this set up his character. He was the Persuadertron. When villagers warned them of monsters in the nearby manor, he convinced some of them to come and help. When he wanted to rob a local lord, he riled the mob up against the aristocrat. The lack of options in that first fight led him to find other options. His high charisma, and he ran with it. It was fun, it was imaginative, and it was totally in line with 5th edition rules. No old school Renaissance required. On the counter side of this, though, is that a lack of imagination, either through nature or environment, shouldn't hinder a player. If you've got a player who just isn't as quick as the others, or someone who is shy and doesn't like to push his ideas forward, or works long hours and is exhausted during the game, there's no reason why they should be punished for not taking part. The set rules and skills of 5th edition allow them to be productive members of the party. While more imaginative or pushy players can get advantage out of adding to the storyline and coming up with ways to make the scenes more interesting, the other players can still be useful, with their skills giving them insight that the others may not have, and still being key parts of the ongoing story. I also see one of the other suggestions as why the old school Renaissance is better with less skills and rules for everything, is that if you want to convince a guard to look the other way, then you need to convince the games master. The deception and persuasion skills are overpowered, people say. That with a dice roll you convince NPCs to do almost anything, like the player I mentioned before. But that's part of playing another character. How does a player who's got Charisma 3 play a character with Charisma 18? Without some of it being down to dice rolls. It totally creates dump stats. If it's up to the player to provide the intelligence, wisdom and charisma through gameplay, then what's the point in having any talent in them? Physical attributes for the win. But that's another challenge in the newer editions. While you might be the most eloquent player out there and come up with a fantastic story to tell the Lord as to why he found you in his bedroom with his jewellery in your hands, if your character has penalties from a low charisma and no points in social skills, then no matter the bonus the Games Master gives you for your fantastic story, you're still likely to fail, which completely makes sense that the barbarian from the wastes, who smells of oxen and barely grunts to people normally, shouldn't be able to weave a story which will astonish the Lord and convince him of anything. And don't get me wrong, I'm no critic of older versions of D&D. I recently played some first edition AD&D and had a whale of time doing so. It's been so long since I'd played it that it was loads of fun, but it also was a real reminder why I prefer new editions. I also do feel like modern editions have lost something that the older versions got right. Some sense of what you should be doing with the treasure you're gathering, and rewards for the legend your character is weaving and building. As you leveled up, your levels gave you titles. So your fighter would become a swordsmaster, and then later a champion, and a lord. Clerics would become bishops and high priests, and wizards could become archmagi. With these titles you might receive rewards equal to that rank. A tower, a temple, a castle, depending on which class you were. You'd also begin to acquire followers. People would come to serve and learn from you, so you'd have other people to equip and feed. Lands and buildings to maintain, a reason for all this gold you've been gathering, rather than just keeping it in a massive pile. And all this would become part of the story as well. Rather than just wandering around righting wrongs, your heroes would have a town to protect, the place where their lands were located. So the stuff that I miss, which they took out of 5th edition, but none of that seems to be what the old school Renaissance people miss. I guess what I'm saying is, if you think 5th edition hampers your game by limiting your imagination, you're playing D&D wrong. As a games master, you have to juggle the weeks when your players are full of imagination and take your game in directions you never imagined. With epic fights and risky challenges, when, other weeks, your players just want to roll some dice and enjoy time with their buddies. The game should be fun in both occasions. But the game shouldn't get in the way of that. Ignore the rules you don't like. Ignore the rules which are inconvenient at that particular moment. You've maybe used them before, you'll maybe use them again. But in that moment, if they're inconvenient, get rid of them. Most of all, remember to have fun. But if you're having problems with your imagination, it's not 5th edition that's the problem. So stop blaming that for games not being fun. 5th edition has its problems, but ruining your imagination is not one of them. Anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough, so thank you for sticking with me. As I said, this was much of a fevered rant. I've tried to cut it as well as I could. I've tried to read my script as well as I could while feeling absolutely terrible. So thank you for watching. But most of all, as always, you look after yourselves and try and stay healthy. I'll catch you later. Bye now.